Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my New Zealand Herald podcast, Ask Me Anything. Now, one thing I've learnt in life is it's never too late to learn something new. So on this podcast, I talk to people from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are, get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. In this episode, I am joined by Crimson Education CEO and co-founder, Jamie Beaton. Jamie has quite an incredible story. He has degrees from Harvard, Stanford, Yale, as well as a PhD from Oxford, for crying out loud. In 2013, at just 17 years old, he founded Crimson Education, a company now valued at, listening up at this, $1 billion. Jamie has recently, and rightly so, been named EY Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and he is with me now from New York. Hi, and thanks for joining me.
Great to be here, Paula. Excited.
Wow. Are you living in New York?
Yes, I've been here for the last 2.5 years. I was back in New Zealand during COVID, and then I've been here since.
Ah, okay. So you did manage to get to our fair shores.
I loved it. It was great. Yeah, best place on earth in general, but especially during COVID.
Yeah. To be fair, we had a lot of people that wanted to come to New Zealand during COVID, and a lot of Americans, and are still kind of keen to get a little bolt hole here in case the world goes crazy again.
Yeah, I think it's a big opportunity.
Yeah.
I think the changes in Luxon's policy might be quite good. Bring a lot of talented Kiwis over, talented foreigners over, get some property, invest in the country. That was how Peter Thiel from Silicon Valley came down and invested in Vend and Xero, which both slam dunks for New Zealand. So I think it's a good. Yeah.
Okay, we're all good because housekeeping rules are easy. It's I'm allowed to ask you anything.
Great.
I normally tell people they don't have to answer, but you know. And then we do the safe space. So just absolutely no judgy. You know, so we just don't judge people. That's just my rule in life, really. Okay, do you cook?
I don't cook.
You wouldn't have to cook in New York, would you?
No, but even if I could, my cooking skills are weak, very weak. Weak.
It's not your thing. I've heard the chicken story.
I've cooked. I cooked some good pizzas during COVID. Some good pancakes, but I would say generally pretty weak. Yeah.
Now, didn't you write about chicken to get into university?
Yes. So back in high school, I worked for a Porto's Mission Bay. I love a Porto's. Good chicken shop. They've still got one in Manukau, but unfortunately, a lot of the other ones have closed down. I worked there in high school with my friend Henry Chan, and that became the main essay for my Harvard application. So I wrote about my experience cooking in the back of the Porto's in Mission Bay, and when everyone flooded in to get chicken tenders and Atropo burgers and stuff, just absolutely caking it. Dropping the stuff on the floor and getting told off. It was a fun essay and a great time. That was my first part-time work.
I kind of love it, Jamie, and that you are, and we're going to talk about this, but you are obviously so incredibly successful and so incredibly bright and driven. But what that story tells me is that we've all got different talents and things that we are and are not good at. And that's exactly how life should be and makes us all a bit different.
Totally. I have a lot of weaknesses and I play to a couple of strengths.
I'm not sure about that. It's probably a bit reversed. Okay, so let's get to know you a bit better, and then let's have a really good chat about the importance of education and give some people advice on that. Now, you were raised in Auckland by just your mum, weren't you? Because I just seem to have had a real lot of them. I've had Sir John Key, whom I know you know, Dame Julie Christie, Paul Henry, shoe designer Catherine Wilson, and they were all highly successful people that have been raised by sole parents, by their mothers on their own. And so what impact do you think your mother had on your success?
First thing is I do have a soft spot for the name Paula because it's my mum's name as well. I guess growing up with my mum, so I think when she had me, I'm an only child as well, she just had such a passion to give me all the opportunities she could in terms of education. And, she didn't just talk about it. She would, she was starting a business from scratch, but she would invest what she could in getting me tutoring, taking me to, number works out of Manukau or, teaching me history herself. So for many years of my schooling at St. Kitts Prep and stuff, She was very, very hands-on. And, she had on my bedroom wall was her MBA degree, her law degree,
Wow.
her commerce degree, her accounting qualification. And, she was always very clear to me that education is the most powerful way for you to, advance yourself, your family, your society forwards. So I think she really set an example for me. She was there as a key emotional support pillar when I was pushing myself really hard in high school. And, she was always my biggest cheerleader and continues to be. So I think, that was probably some of the wiring.
Why was education so important to her?
I think my granddad, John, he was a very sharp cookie, but he had to stop high school when he was 14 and, go work in the Merchant Navy, drop out of school and traditional school and help, fund family expenses and stuff. He moved to New Zealand when he was, in his early 20s. And he worked in a lot of, quite hard manual labor jobs, helped to weld the Auckland Harbour Bridge and stuff. And, then I guess he passed the mantle to my mum, and she was an out-of-zone applicant to Epsom Girls Grammar School.
Wow.
And she worked really hard to get there. And, she worked every single summer break to help, with the family. And she studied really, really hard. And that helped her to kind of create her own company and get through these different university degrees back when that was pretty, unusual. And so, she just had this wiring that education was critical. And so I guess she kind of passed the mantle to me, and she said, this is what I've done. It's time for you to take it to the next level in our family. So that was really the ethos that she espoused within me.
And so, I mean, you are super smart. So do you think you've always been super smart? How much does genuine intellect versus hard work and that combination work, do you think, for particularly that kind of education and success?
I think the vast majority of academic success comes from hard work. If you think about cultural backgrounds, and at Crimson, I see thousands of the world's families with different backgrounds, countries from, Russia to India to, New Zealand to America, from, the highest income families to, families for which, going abroad is the biggest investment they can make. And what I would say is the, cultural focus at home is the single biggest factor. The intensity of the family's belief in education, and then, the child's subsequent intrinsic motivation is very linked to that. So the kids who put in the work and they get through all the academics, they do their homework, they're studying for tests, they take a lot of pride in good results. There's a high expectation at home. That does a lot of. So if the family's setting a bar that's high for education, the kid can do well almost all the time. There are very few scenarios where I meet a kid who wants to do well academically and just is floundering. That happens sometimes, but very rarely. So from all the thousands of kids I've seen, the thousands that have gone abroad through Crimson, the hard work and also strategy are the two biggest drivers. Your natural, skills can be adapted, and you might be stronger in humanities or math or, languages or whatever, and you can evolve to play to your strengths. But I think, the sheer number of hours you put into this is big. And, I would say there probably weren't many kids that put as many hours into academics as I did growing up. My mum's influence.
Yeah. And you obviously got that buzz. But I'm thinking about my own grandsons. Love my boys dearly, but they're 9 and 10. And I can barely, they just, mind you, they're so into sport. And the good news is that they are outside most of the time, they're not those ones that just sort of sit in front of a screen playing, games. But trying to get them to concentrate a bit more on the academic is quite hard work because they run past with a ball in their hand.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's a great point. And I think there's something magical about Kiwi upbringing where you have the sports, you've got some academics, it's an all-round education, you're outside, you're building character, all of that's super important. And there are countries out there like India and China and Singapore where kids basically are going hard in their education from sort of 4 till 18 with extremely high intensity. And I think that's not very balanced. So, I mean, I think New Zealand, we're on the more relaxed spectrum for sure as far as, schooling in general. I would say, definitely more room to do some good academics. And it has to, it's not necessarily fun and exciting when you first get going, but when you start getting good test results, you get momentum, you get some wins, a teacher tells you you're doing good, you get more excited about it. And, so I think getting early wins when the child's younger, particularly math and English education are big. My mum used to celebrate even the smallest wins that I had and sort of, trick me to keep going in her special way. So I think a bit of cajoling at that age, 9 and 10 is quite important.
Hey, so tell me, and I think we should just explain a bit about Crimson and what it is. So, I mean, you applied for you sort of tell the story of meeting someone on the train and they were going to Yale and they just expanded your mind, yeah?
That's right. So I was hopping on the train at Glen Station, and there was a boy, Ben Cornfeld, who hopped on, and he was the Dux of our school at King's. And he'd just gotten into Yale, and he was telling me about this exciting adventure where he'd applied in the last couple of months. He was an American citizen, and he said, you should really think about this. And he kind of put this, idea in my mind, and I just got really excited about it because up until then I had this vague idea I'd probably go to maybe Auckland, do medicine, but I didn't really know why I wanted to do that. I just thought it was sort of a good thing to do, good academic pursuit. But then once I realized I could go to these like awesome global institutions and, be there with top kids from around the world and challenge myself, something about that kind of ignited this fire in me. And I, went hard for those 4 years of high school. To get into these top schools in America, you need, academics, extracurriculars, leadership, and essays. And they look at your last 4 years, so kind of age 14, 18. So I went through this process. I applied to all these schools in the US and UK and got into them. And then I had all these kids from, schools around Auckland asking me, why did you apply overseas? How'd you do it? And that's kind of the early ethos of what got them spinning. And so what we do is actually today we're the world's biggest provider of college admissions guidance, helping high school students getting into these global universities, particularly in the US and UK. We send a lot of kids to the top 100 US universities, the top 20 UK universities. We're about 5% of incoming international students now to the Ivy League. So 1 in 20 kids walking around campus from a foreign country is a Crimson kid these days. And we train the kids pretty intensively for those last several years of high school. We also have an online high school, which is really popular for ambitious students. And Numberworks, a household Kiwi tuition brand, is part of our group and other different units along the way. But our core bread and butter is helping ambitious kids breaking into these amazing universities.
And did you see it being as big as it is from that kind of, from the spark of the idea at 17? 17 for crying out loud, you started it, right? And you couldn't even be a director at that age until you were 18. And so, you kind of, when you started it then, did you see where it was going? Or was it just kind of start something, I've got a good idea, and then it just kind of, better ideas kept coming along? Or?
So I guess what I saw, let me give you 2 examples of where I realized this could be really big. There was a boy called Samir Singh from Hamilton Boys High School, and I was mentoring him in the first year and second year of Crimson. And Hamilton Boys hadn't sent that many kids abroad. The school was an NCA school, more of a sporty school actually. And, he was an Indian Kiwi boy. They never had an Indian head boy. He came through Crimson, he got head boy, he got Dux, he got into 5 Ivy League schools, got into Harvard, was on the front page of the New Zealand Herald, headed over to Harvard. He went on to raise millions in venture capital funding in his early 20s.
Wow.
He's now running a generative AI company in Silicon Valley. When he joined Crimson, he'd never learned computer science. He didn't know what the field was. He wasn't learning it at school. So he went from Hamilton to raising, millions in VC funding, building his own company in the middle of New York, within a couple of years. Another example would be this guy, Lucas Lee. This boy grew up in Maclean's. In Pakuranga in Auckland, came through Crimson, got into Harvard. Now he works for a private equity fund on Wall Street, thriving in New York. So what I realized quite early on is that whenever there's something happening in the world that doesn't make sense, there's probably a reason for it or there's a big opportunity. And what I saw is that it didn't make sense. There was all these amazing Kiwi kids who could get into these schools, but they didn't know how to apply. They didn't know what it took. They didn't know about the scholarship and the financial aid and the funding. They didn't know about the amazing job opportunities these things unlock in, Silicon Valley and Wall Street and stuff. And so when I realized that actually, I think people aren't applying just because they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to get there. The guidance counselors aren't really sure culture around this. I kind of saw this opportunity to really change the culture and make it so that every ambitious kid across the country knows this pathway is very possible, very doable, and make that accessible. So initially I saw a big opportunity in New Zealand, and then I flew to China, and I had this investor who sent me over there to check it out. And I met these companies that were off massive scale. They were New York Stock Exchange, $20, $30 billion companies, helping, a generation of Chinese kids come to America. And I, met these businesses, and I realized actually I can do this all around the world. And this can be very, very impactful, and it can help these foreign kids really realize the best version of themselves. So I would say when I first started it, no idea. But within a year, I had an idea it could be pretty big in New Zealand. And then when I met the guys at Tiger in New York and they kind of showed me these companies in China, I realized it could be really big. So that was sort of the evolution of my thinking.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely incredible. Right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, though, I want to talk a bit more about, the education system itself, and why we need you, because we do need you, but New Zealand's struggling a little bit on the education side. And let's talk about how you build a successful business. We're going to be back real shortly. Okay, we're back with Crimson Education CEO and co-founder Jamie Beaton, and we're going to get some advice about being an entrepreneur and around the education system. And we're even going to talk a little bit about friendship and mental health, because it all, of course, just all winds itself in together like these things do. Let's talk a bit about being an entrepreneur, and particularly a young one, and some of the pressures around that. And certainly, you know, a friend of mine and your former business partner, Jake Millar, you know, he tragically lost his life. And I mean, goodness gracious, how did his death affect you?
I guess, first of all, I'd say he was my friend first, second and third, and, you know, business partner in some long long way down the line. I mean, I'm still shocked by it. I'm in New York right now, and I used to hang out with Jake all the time in New York. And, you know, in my whole life, I remember my first call with him. He hopped on I was I think about second year at Harvard. I hopped on the call with him. He had so much boundless energy, so many ideas. He was super sharp. He could tell me everything about what was happening in New Zealand, all these different businesses globally. He had this, you know, incredible passion for what he was doing that you don't see very often in a young person. And I think that spirit, that flame he had was incredible. So, I mean, I think it's just so tragic, so sad, and really it's a story that needs to be shared broadly in New Zealand, because, you know, whether it be how we support young founders, how we support young people in general, how we support ambition in New Zealand, you know, how we support someone when they're stumbling. These are all things that are so critical for, you know, the next generation of folks that, you know, can learn from Jake.
And do we have that horrible kind of tall poppy here as well? And then particularly if someone does stumble and they've had a bit of limelight or they've been successful, it's like a nasty pile-in, isn't it?
Super. And, you know, sort of I go through each day knowing that, you know, if I stumble, there will be daggers thrown at me like instantly from, you know, some of the folks that, you know, would love to see places like Crimson or any entrepreneur organization sort of struggle. And that does kind of weigh on you, right? Because basically, not only do you have to worry about the actual problem, but you need to worry about the fact that, you know, there's this heat. Now, I don't really mind that much. You know, I have like a relatively thick skin, but still, you know, during the darkest chapters of an entrepreneurial journey, that can be stressful. And especially a young person who hasn't handled that kind of heat before. Like, you know, you would know all about this from your time in politics where you've got such scrutiny. But, you know, if you're like a young entrepreneur, you didn't go into this to be sort of, you know, blasted. You went into this to build something exciting with big ideas, and, you know, entrepreneurship's inherently high risk. And so you've got to create an environment for these people to take a big, you know, shot. And I think there's something special about places like, you know, the culture in like Silicon Valley where people mind someone who stumbled 1, 2, 3 times. Maybe they hit it big on their 4th business. You know, my mentor, Julian Robertson, who sadly passed away recently, he started his hedge fund that made him, you know, billions of dollars and created a legacy of investors when he was 48, you know, much later in his career. So I think you need to have that safe environment to build. And, you know, you need to have balanced commentary and good support because it is very stressful. Even if things are going well, it's just a high intensity path to choose.
The Americans almost expect you to fail. You know what I mean? Like you almost haven't pushed hard enough and you know what I mean? Like it's like, of course you gave it a go and hey, not every idea is going to run and let's go again, hey? It's just an amazing difference in that kind of outlook.
Yeah.
And as you say,
absolutely.
You sort of touched on it and it's so true. You know, I used to think when I was, and particularly like Minister of Social Development and that sort of thing, you know, like, you know, big important jobs that affected people's lives directly. And I just think there's people out there that are wishing I would fail. You know, like, and I'm like,
absolutely.
Why would you wish that I failed? Because then some of the worst, you know, some of the most vulnerable people in New Zealand will be worse off. You know, like it just never quite made sense to me. And then a bit like you, I'm lucky I've got a thick skin, but I just decided that, you know, they don't get to live in my head, you know, like you know, but they were actually actively working to try and trip me up, really. It's weird.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, particularly, I mean, in politics, I guess there's this active incentive for one side to always, you know, exploit anything you do that is even right, you know, for their own, you know, I guess popularity and significance. In entrepreneurship, the forces are a bit different, where competitors are just trying to, eliminate you because, your lunch could be their lunch. And so there's a certain degree of kind of competitive intensity. But at least in entrepreneurship, it's transparent. Like, I've got a product, this guy's got a product, and it's a competition. But I don't like some of the negative acidity that tends to sort of gel up in other domains where where it's not really needed and just creates a sort of negative culture. And I do think I don't know if there are many entrepreneurs who, for example, don't do entrepreneurship because they're worried about Tohu syndrome in New Zealand. I think normally people don't switch off because of this. But I think it does kind of weigh on your calculus of how big you want to swing. So, these American entrepreneurs, their willingness to just, go full throttle, go super hardcore, move at extreme speed, deploy a lot of capital, take big risks. And that yields things like, Tesla or SpaceX. But you need to have a culture where that's really encouraged.
Yeah.
And we sell folks like Rod Drury and stuff because they've hit it big. But it's pretty brutal for all the folks that don't, and the vast majority don't. And so, I think it's bad for New Zealand, especially, we need these guys to go and swing big and, create a new opportunity for the next generation.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I do think, I think about Jake a lot. And I also think that, there is, the media have a responsibility, actually, in how they report and how they want to knock people around and down and the effects that have. And we see that daily as well. And I think it's getting worse and not better.
Yeah, I think the challenge a little bit is, when I first read the news, I had this great belief that the media was this impartial commentator, spreading truth to the world so they could make good judgments. But when you think about, for example, the business of media, for example, companies like, Fox in the US or whatever, that had this huge defamation lawsuit against them, where they're actively spreading incorrect information because it's good for their viewership and, makes their show more popular. There's a lot of incentives for, a struggling media organization to say share bad news. It's more viral, it's more salacious, it gets 10 times the clicks usually. And so you have, journalists who are hunting for the negative scoop all the time. And part of that is important because you've got to hold people accountable, and, there's an important counterbalance and, need to confront figures of authority. But also, in an environment where, media is challenged by TikTok and Facebook, and there's an advertising battle and they got to get revenue and clicks, it can create a race to the bottom as far as quality of research and desire for negativity, which I think is not good. But it's challenging because any one journalist is also they're not a bad person. They're just in a system where the incentives are quite messed up.
But you don't need to kick someone when they're down. You know what I mean? Learn from it and spread the messages by all means. I mean, and I watched the aftermath of our election here, and there's those on social.
People are down.
Yeah, social media dancing, and within hours of Labor's demise, and then I've just been thinking, God, they just deserve to go home for a while and I've been there, right? Just regroup and freaking. You're tired and everything's on edge, and we just got to give people a bit of a break, and people like yourselves and Jake and politicians and that sort of thing that are a little bit more public. It doesn't mean that it hurts any less. It just means actually you get another level of it because it's played out in the media.
Yeah, super. And the thing that does haunt me about Jake is if there was no media coverage, or even if it was a lot more, responsible and diluted, I was chatting to him a long time post some of the initial unfiltered stuff, and he was challenged in different ways, but he was in a good headspace for certain opportunities. And, it was just this media pylon that really wore on him, and he felt like, there was no escape. And, there's always a new day, but it doesn't feel like that when, you're getting attacked by all kinds of people, all strangers on the internet with opinions, and they have no remorse. And, that's horrible. So, yeah, it's a truly tragic loss for the entrepreneurial community in New Zealand at large. And, it's really important that we talk about it.
Yeah, it is. And I hope that there's a message out there, of people kind of looking at their own behaviour and understanding that there may be consequences, and you don't know where someone's at, you don't know what's going on for them, and actually taking a breath and look, hey, doing your job and holding people to account by all means, but there's also got to be a level of fairness about it.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Okay, so give me your top tips, Jamie, for those that might be thinking about becoming an entrepreneur.
So as an entrepreneur, the most important thing to do is to find a niche, and then within that niche, find an even smaller niche, and then even that maybe is too big, and then go even nicher, and then start there. So within Crimson, we began with a tiny market. The 50 kids in Auckland that wanted to go from Auckland to the Ivy League, right? Every investor would say, that's a crazy small market. How can that be a serious business? Mm-hmm. But in today's world, if you find a genuine niche, you can do that across many countries, many geographies. You can go into new products, as we've done. And so it's much better to start with a super narrow focus and absolutely dominate that than to, have this overly broad initial approach that sort of fails on all fronts. So I think too many founders at the start, you've got to have that big vision. That's really exciting, but you've got to really be able to zone in to execute on that initial tiny niche. For me, that was Auckland kids getting into the Ivy League. Yeah. That's where I'd start.
Do you reckon every young person thinks they're going to get rich by designing an app?
No, I don't think so. And designing an app, it's a tough game. You got to, consumer social apps are very, very challenging. So I think how every young person could get rich is they could take data science, take artificial intelligence, take computer science classes, and from that they can be earning 100K plus pretty consistently, pretty fast, go on a great career trajectory, maybe get equity in a great company. But I think the best way to get rich from an education standpoint today is computer science, STEM education. True. Do it to a high level, very, very consistent. I mean, I see it with kids all around the world. They do this path. They're all financially successful. Yeah. So I would say that's the biggest slam dunk approach. You don't need to start your own business necessarily.
We talk about it though, and you've talked about it in the past, but that value of education, and, we're all quite happy to put money into, property or wherever we think, but, that saving for our children's education and recognising that perhaps spending, a few tens of thousands of dollars on that is actually a much bigger investment that sets them up for life. And you talk about that quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, in China, 75% of kids get tutoring, and that might sound like a high number, but if you can build your own you're going to work for 50 years. You're going to apply your skills and knowledge to every business you do, to every pursuit you have, and you're the best investment. You're not going anywhere. So your own human capital is very powerful, particularly in today's era where I mentioned these different STEM skills. I see these kids going to these amazing business schools like Wharton Business School, or going over to the UK doing like an amazing London School of Economics, Accounting and Finance program. Their career opportunities post that are amazing, and you can kind of chill in high school and go for an easy education path. But if you go hard and you can achieve these things early in your career, it makes you be able to rocket through that 20s, 30s and beyond. So I think it's a very obvious return on investment. Yeah. And families and programs that they don't do this because they just love education. It's the clearest path forward for the next generation to advance themselves. And that's kind of what I experienced in my own life personally.
Do you have many that come in for that sort of second chance education? So, because I did that, right? I misbehaved and squandered my my teen years, and then realised actually I did have a brain in my head and maybe I should work out how to use it. And sort of went back to education in my 20s. Do you see much of that?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of students who come to us who, want to transfer schools. They want to get into a community college, or, for example, they're finding high school, they're getting bullied, they're having some issue. They don't love the school they're at, whatever. And we find an alternative path for them through Crimson Global Academy, our online high school. So we have a lot of students from that segment. We also have a lot of kids through Numberworks, our tuition academies throughout New Zealand, who, have lost confidence in their math and English, and they want to get in there, those skills, get up to scratch and get back into the classroom and compete. So yeah, we love to see those students grow and thrive. I think it's important to jump on it early because it kind of compounds. And if you start to think education is something you can't do and it's not for you, it becomes a big mental barrier, and you find yourself doing other things. But I think jump on early, turn around the train, get the right support, very fixable. Yeah. And I've seen some incredible transfer. I've seen kids who got suspended from school getting full scholarships to top 10 US universities 3 years later.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, you touch on that because you have seen some stuff. We're 10 years in business now. What have you learnt in that 10 years? What do you know now that you didn't know then?
Oh, I have a lot of burns, bruises, and scratches.
Is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, there was one thing I did that was partially because I was maybe naive and perhaps a bit overconfident at the time. But I raised this big round of capital in our Series B. We were just in New Zealand and Australia. And, normally you would responsibly grow into, one more market every couple of years, et cetera, et cetera. We opened in 20 markets in about 2 years. So I was on a plane every week. We opened in India and we opened in, Tokyo, we opened in Brazil, and we just went, absolutely guns blazing. And probably, that was a pretty pivotal moment for Crimson. If it didn't go right, I don't know. I don't know how we'd turn out. But fortunately, we hit the ground running. A lot of these markets ended up really thriving and we've built this global presence. But I would say, with the gray hair that I have now, proverbially, or maybe actually, would I have done that again? And would I have the courage to do that? I don't know. But I had that blissful youth naivety, so I powered it and it worked out. But that could have been deadly.
I love that though, There is something when you kind of don't know, and so you just go for it. And then we've been talking a bit to a few people actually in my podcast who could just go, you've just got more to lose. When you've been in business for a while and you've been successful and that sort of thing, actually taking those risks that you took in the early days, you feel like you've got more to lose now.
Yeah. And so, I really try and keep our organization super agile, entrepreneurial, jumping on big opportunities. Like our launch of our Crimson Global Academy, full school operation during COVID would be another good example of that. But I guess to your question on 10 years, but, business, like many things, it's just so much about the people. And I've just seen incredible stories of someone in the right environment, how much they can grow. So I'll give you an example. Our co-founder, one of them, Feng Zhou, he grew up in China. Family, little means. They sent all the money they had to pay for his Rangitoto College international fees. He came to New Zealand, lived by himself in this homestay, set up, worked at this Chinese takeaway shop to pay for his textbooks and stuff. He then went through Rangitoto College, and his parents said, hey, look, we don't have any more resources to fund this. He won a full scholarship to ANU, the top school in Australia, Australian National University, went there. Then he, joined Crimson with me. He got into Goldman Sachs and Stanford and Harvard and Tsinghua. And, he's gone from basically not speaking a word of English. He was the Prime Minister's scholar. John Key gave him a medal for his academics after high school, first international kid to do it. And then he's gone from not being able to manage anyone. He manages hundreds of people now. He built our whole operation across, across China, across Singapore, across Japan, runs our product and engineering team, all self-trained. So, that's a good, Feng Zhou, he compounded at light speed. And, he didn't know it all at the beginning. He still doesn't, know it all for sure. But man, his rate of growth has been incredible. And so I think, good people, good values with high intensity in the right environment, they can really run. And so I'm a big believer of who you surround yourself with, how big the goal is, can be really instrumental in what outcomes are created. So if I can give you many examples of that, but Feng Zhou's example, very inspiring. 10 years
very inspiring, man. Yeah, very. Okay, goodness, you're so busy and you're doing such a lot and you're still studying, I believe, in times and that sort of thing. How do you get sort of work-play balance, or is there play?
There's plenty of play, being in New York, there's midnight comedy shows, there's concerts all the time. I love roller coasters. It's a bit of a love of mine. So I was out in Ohio at Cedar Point, which is the roller coaster capital of the US. It's always very fun.
Yeah. You're bonkers. Really? Roller coasters?
I love them. Skydiving, bungee jumping. It's all great. I don't drink and I don't do drugs. So, you've got to get your adrenaline and your dopamine. I gotta get my thrill. That's right. I got to get my thrill somewhere. But I can't get on roller coasters. Yeah.
You'd get on well with my husband. He's the same. But I'm, I'd be probably sitting in the wine bar waiting for you both. It's okay. We've all got to be different, right?
Yeah, love it. Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, this podcast is called Ask Me Anything. So you now get to ask me something, Jamie.
If there was one government department which you could totally burn down and rebuild, so you just totally wiped it and you had to start from scratch, which department would it be and why?
Oh, my goodness. I Okay, the easy answer to that is you would do all of them and that's only because they have evolved over time, and as a consequence, you're kind of always adding on bits and they get disjointed, and and then there's ones that you would kind of never do because you could almost, health's a great example, right? You can spend so much time rearranging the deck chairs where actually people are dying in the corridors of hospitals or not getting the operations that they need. So I think with any reforms, you've got to be really cognizant of there being, which is me being practical, right? But there's only so much energy. There's only so many people in New Zealand that have got the capacity and the capability to do it, that you've got to be careful that you're not just, hey, the result might be good, but that'll take 10 years. And in the meantime, how do you keep the doors open and the operations happening? And that's where I think we've seen that centralisation kind of happening more and more, that hey, I'm a Nat and it's my belief, but, I believe communities and will be better for themselves. But on that, I do... this will be so unpopular, but, there's some that just shouldn't be there. And that's because we've evolved as a society. So, some of those, the kind of Ministry for Women, some of the Pacific ones, they do definitely need representation, but do they need their own ministry? I think there's smarter ways we could do all of that now. But if you were... they shouldn't do this, by the way, but I look at MB and I just think it's a mammoth of a machine. It's got something like, I'm making this up, but something like 8-10 different ministers. It's got, 50 different departments. It's got nothing's really joined up well. But then I'd probably knock them all over and come at it from a population perspective and not a discipline.
Well said.
Because you're not just... you're not just a person that's into education and multiple degrees. You're also a person who has health needs, who has societal needs, who has, what I mean? And government doesn't see you like that. We see you only through the lens of the department that you might be requiring assistance or services from.
Makes a lot of sense, actually. I think some of these departments get so big and bureaucratic in places like the US, but at least in New Zealand, you can kind of get your arms around an organization and kind of, get to know the people and, I guess lead some reform where necessary, which is nice. Yeah. But I feel like some of these things are so gargantuan in the States, like, I don't know, the FBI or something. It's very hard to lead any meaningful reform.
Hey, a really good minister and a really good chief executive can make a huge difference in New Zealand and the department and how they service New Zealanders. So that's, as you say, that's kind of cool. Okay, Jamie, thank you for joining me today and sharing your story. If people want to find out more from you or about Crimson Education, where can they go?
They can go to our website, crimsoneducation.org, or they can follow me on LinkedIn. I often post there as well. Awesome.
And that's it for another episode of Ask Me Anything. You can get in touch with me by emailing askpaula@nzherald.co.nz. Please feel free to send me through your questions for the podcast or any thoughts you have. Find me on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn. Make sure you follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.